welcome. Happy to be here. I've spoken at Upstart a few times. Some of you guys know me, some of you guys don't. I'm Navin Thukkaram. I've had over $3 billion of exits as an entrepreneur and investor. I've sold a company to Yahoo and a few other things. I'm dialing in from the US. And I've also raised and invested hundreds of millions of dollars in my career. So I have some idea, having been pitched thousands and thousands of times, what it's like to get pitched and what mistakes founders and entrepreneurs make when they're raising startup capital. And I don't want you to make these mistakes, okay? I do not want you to make these rookie mistakes. And here's why. Peter Thiel, his book 0 to 1, one of the best books written about innovation, technology, startups, etc., says that basically there are a million ways to fail, but there are only a few ways to succeed. Why is that important? Well, that's important because that means that you can fail so many different ways that you don't learn as much as you think you do from failure, because there's 100 ways to fail. You just figured out one way to fail. There are 99 others, right? So if you can avoid some of the rookie mistakes when you're raising capital, that's just going to help you get to the next level. And that's what I want to highlight here today. And I want you guys active in the chat because I can't see what everyone's. Peter Thiel, Andrews. I'll write that later. So here's the first thing. Why are you raising money in the first place? Do you have a distinct value proposition that you know your customers want? Not that you think your customers want, but that you know your customers want. I'll give you an example from my own career. When I was COO, board member, and seed investor of Quickie, an amazing startup founded back in 2010, we were creating an algorithm that automatically created videos, and we did quite well. We actually launched at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco, the largest tech conference in the world, tech competition in the world, and we actually won. But here's the thing, the product wasn't even ready until the night before the demo, live in front of 2,000, 3,000 people. So we hadn't really tested the product with live customers. So after we won TechCrunch Disrupt, which was a huge honor, we got about $10 million of funding from people like the founders of YouTube, the founders of Google, founders of Facebook. The list goes on and on. But even though we had all this credibility, this stamp of approval from Silicon Valley and all this money from the Silicon Valley elite, we didn't actually test the product prior with customers. So 2 years into that journey, even though we had a lot of users, we weren't creating any revenue because customers didn't want to pay for this automated video algorithm. So what we had to do is we had to shut that first product down, our most popular product, because we did not have what? We didn't have a customer value proposition. We'd never tested that value proposition. Now, that story ends pretty well. We pivoted. We launched actually our third product. We tested our customer value proposition on our third product because we learned the hard way that you got to do that. And we ended up selling the company for $50 million to Yahoo just as we were running out of money. That's usually a 7-minute story I'm telling in 90 seconds. But we sold the company for $50 million before we ran out of money because we tested our value proposition with customers. So my question to you is, have you really tested your value prop to customers? Because that is the biggest mistake startups make. Of the startups that fail, over half the founders say the reason that the startup failed is because there was no product market fit for their business. Think about that. No product market fit. You have to test that extensively before you even go out and raise money. Because also investors are going to know if you haven't tested your customer value proposition. So that is the first thing I want to start with. Why are you raising money in the first place? Another thing I see all the time, especially in early stage startups, is that the founding team does not have the combined skill set to do what they need to do, right? So for example, if you're starting a software company and you don't have a technical co-founder, that's going to be a huge red flag because who's going to actually program and code whatever algorithms you need, right? Well, then you got to hire somebody. When you hire someone, you need money, right? And that takes longer. And they're not bought into your company because they're not a founder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to make sure your founding team has the requisite skill sets. to get you guys to your next milestone. Number 3, this is a big one. They're all big ones, but this is a big one, which is trying to do more than one thing. And you see this all the time. And I never get it. I never understand why founders want to do more than one thing. Either more than one product, more than one geography, or more than one market. Okay, if you have one product, that's a great product, but you're selling it on B2C, right, direct to consumer, and you're trying to sell it to enterprise customers, guess what? Not going to work. Those are two totally different sales motions, right? Totally different marketing, different types of hires you need to make when you're going direct to consumer versus when you're going to enterprise, big companies, you got to hire a different type of salesperson. So even though you might have one product or one service, if you're going to 2 markets, you're doing more than one thing. Do not do more than one thing. Why? Because you have very limited time, very limited money, very limited energy on your small team. You got to focus it like a laser on one product or service, on one market, on one type of customer. Okay? That's the only way you'll be successful when you're an early stage startup. And sort of as a piggyback to that, relying on big companies to sell or distribute or buy your product is a huge mistake, right? And I see this all the time too. It's like, oh, we got this memorandum of understanding from, whoever, Disney. We got this, like, we had this great meeting with NBC that happened to me at Quickie, actually. We were working with a lot of big companies. I learned the hard way that big companies take a really, really, really long time, and then typically they don't do anything, okay? And your funding cycle as an early stage startup is 12 to 18 months, 18 months max, probably more like 12, right? Your funding cycle is 12 months. How can you afford to have a 6 to 12 month sales cycle with a big company? A lot of founders and entrepreneurs think that that brand name or that big company balance sheet is going to save them, that distribution is going to magically make their startup work. It doesn't work. Big companies actually do the opposite. They follow consumer trends, right? They're waiting to be led for you to prove that consumers like your product, then they'll adopt your product, not the other way around, okay? So relying on big companies to do anything at all, frankly, is a huge mistake, whether it be funding or distribution or sales or consuming your product. Okay, but let's say you didn't do all those things. You're actually in the room, you made a successful pitch. I actually just created a fundraising course 2 days ago, which I already had signed up to speak on this topic months ago with Jason, but then I actually just created a fundraising course because I see these same things happen all the time. And so you're in the room, right? You're going to raise investment dollars. A big mistake entrepreneurs make is focusing only on valuation, not terms. Why? Because as entrepreneurs, we understand valuation very well, right? We know we want a higher valuation for our company. But typically, founders and entrepreneurs are not lawyers. They don't understand all the nitty-gritty behind all the terms that can happen. Is my face really stunning because the sun's coming out here at 7:30 in the morning? I can't really tell. They focus on the valuation, not the terms. That's a huge mistake because venture capitalists and early stage investors, we understand terms extremely well. So there can be some very dangerous things in the terms, like things that the investors can make you do, or negative controls, things they can detail to make sure you're not doing. And that's going to really constrict how you run your startup, folks. So be very careful with the terms you're signing up to, because these are the terms of your business. This is going to be how you're able to run your company. So be very careful with the terms you choose. And make sure you have good advice from a good startup lawyer and read up on that prior to signing up for anything. Here's another thing that's related but different, which is raising money at too high a valuation. I hope you guys have seen the show Silicon Valley. In season 1, this happens, right? When you raise money too high a valuation and then you don't grow into it, that means when you raise your next round of funding, you're going to have to raise a flat round or a down round. And that's very, very hard to make up. Why? Because a new investment group does not want to come in and catch a falling knife. You heard that term? I don't know what it is, på svenska. Jag pratar perfekt svenska, by the way. No, I'm kidding. I do not speak perfect Swedish. But I can tell you that, thanks, Gustav, one of the best spot in the episodes, exactly what happens is an entrepreneur raise money at too high valuation, but then the company doesn't grow into that valuation, right? They don't justify the valuation. So when they're trying to raise their next round, they got to raise at a lower valuation. What happens? No one wants to raise money, company goes to zero. Huge, huge problem. Because here's another thing that you want to think about when you're raising money. You think you're raising money for this round, which is true, half true. But what's actually happening is you're trying to raise enough money to reach certain milestones so you can raise money on the next round. So you always have to be thinking about, this is actually a good thing to close on with 5 minutes left, you always have to be thinking about your next round of funding when you're raising the current round. Why? Because your future investors in round 2 are going to be looking back, okay? And they're going to be asking, hey, did this company do what they say they're going to do? Did they hit those milestones that they said they would on the previous round of funding, right? And if you didn't, then it's going to be very hard to raise money in that next round. So when you're raising money, you want to raise enough money to do two things. One, last at least 12 or 18 months with your burn. And two, you want to raise enough money so that you hit all your milestones. So in the future, when you look back, your next round of investors will say, hey, they hit their milestones. I want to put money in this company. And finally, with 2 minutes left, thank you, Peter. I hope it is great advice. Picking the wrong investor, picking the wrong partner. Why? Well, think about it. In places like Sweden or America, the divorce rate is over 50%. And that is when people actually love each other and they still break up, right? So you're probably not going to fall in love with your early stage investors. So when you're picking those investors, make sure that you are aligned on your strategy, how you want to spend the money, the direction of the company, the time frame, basically anything that you can get aligned on with your investors. Please talk about it up front and get aligned. Because yes, all money is green, as we like to say in the US, but investors are different. They're going to have different priorities, different time frames, different strategies, different things they're good at, different things they're bad at, right? Everybody's different. So make sure you get aligned with your investor and pick the right partner. Because picking the wrong partner, whether it's in marriage or as a co-founder or as an investment partner, that can be disastrous for an early stage startup. You see so many startups wasting time on BS and politics between founders fighting with their investors, right? That's not going to help you win your market, right? You have to be internally on your team 100% aligned on what you're doing, and that goes for your co-founders, and that goes for your investors. All right, guys, I've left exactly 90 seconds left. If anyone has any questions to ask me, go ahead and ask me in the chat, because I would love to stay longer and help you guys out. Nabil says, is it fine to use a portion of seed money for marketing and acquiring users? It definitely is okay. Not only okay, I hope you use some of your seed money to market and acquire users. You know why? Because that means you probably have a beta version or version 1 of your product or service ready to go as you're coming into your seed round. That's an ideal situation. Like I said, the first thing I said on this Zoom keynote or whatever, hop-in keynote was that make sure you have a value proposition for your product or service that you understand before you go out and raise money. So if you raise some seed financing, the deal, and you go out and market and acquire users, that is going to show to your firm, to your company, and to your next round of investors that there is demand, right? There's demand and people are actually consuming your product or service. So I think it's a great idea to go out and acquire users with a portion of your seed money, as long as you're measuring what those users are doing. If you're talking about users that are not actually paying for your product, there's no long-term value to each user, then you better be sure that you're engaging those users and learning from their behavior on your platform. All right, what are the key points you should get aligned with on investors? Just business plan and growth, or also soft matters like company culture. I think that soft matters like company culture aren't probably going to come up because hopefully your investors are not sitting in your office, analyzing your company culture. But definitely a business plan, right? Which is two things though, right? Your business plan is not just your budget and your financial projections. Your business plan is also how your product is going to phase out over time, what your customer metrics are going to do over time, right? What your user engagement metrics are if you're, let's say, a mobile app platform, right? You want to know what your users are doing. You want to have certain targets for how much engagement you want from those users. You probably want a certain number of users. But a small number of highly engaged users are much more valuable than a large number of not so engaged users. So all those different things are part of your business plan and your growth goals. That should probably be enough, and also the time frame, right? How long is it going to take to hit that business plan and those goals? Probably 12 to 18 months. And making sure you raise enough money, like I talked about before, to hit those milestones so your second round of investors can look back and say, hey, you guys did a great job. Alexander says, what if you plan on selling B2B, but need to prove your potential business will be popular with their final customers? Alexander, great point. My main company, Scott, where I'm lead investor, we have a B2B to B to C platform. So we really have like two layers between us and the end user, which, by the way, Alexander, that's great because that gives you a lot of leverage, right? You're selling B2B, but then their end customer is actually consuming. So you have this massive leverage where your customer is selling to a larger group of customers. And that's a tough thing. Typically, B2B businesses, you need to raise more money because the sales cycle to those Bs, to those businesses, is a lot longer. You got to make sure you take that into account when you're selling, right? Because at these big companies, people get fired, they change direction, they get bored with you, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. They got a coffee break, right? And that all impacts you. And like time is money. Alexander, you just have to go out and prove to those customers. You have to go to the C's and prove that they want your product or service. There's no easy way around it. If you can do that through the B2B channel, even better. But sometimes it's better to go direct when you're testing. Now, I don't want you to do two business lines, right? I don't want you to do both B2B and B2C, but there's nothing wrong with going beta testing B2C to prove to the B2B, a lot of B's in my little answer here, that it's actually working. And by the way, we must be doing something right, guys, because the actual amount of people in this session has gone up by 20% as I'm answering this Q&A, which I wasn't expecting. Okay, let's keep going. Why not? Gustav, you have a long question, my man, but I'm going to read it live. I hope it makes a lot of sense. A lot of investors encourage you to take out the fluff out of your pitch. Great point. Actually, you know what, guys? Also, I should have done this before. If you want to follow me, Dream Navin on Instagram. It's not because I need more followers on Instagram. It's because I post a lot of stuff like this on Instagram. That's pretty much my main channel. And also, if you go into my Instagram bio on Dream Navin, I put a custom link yesterday. I dealt with Bitly just for you guys, okay? And I hyperlink something that can send you to a web page. And if you want, I don't care if you do. I hope you do, but you don't have to. I send out emails every week or 2 weeks talking about topics like this. So I literally have like 30 trainings exactly like this on fundraising, on value proposition. So go ahead, get it for free, learn something, and save some money Just go to @DreamNavin on Instagram and you can sign up in my link to bio or just following me, whatever. I'm mildly entertaining on Instagram. Okay, take the fluff out of your pitch. They want you to get straight to your pitch. I'm getting a lot of questions, so I got to scroll up in the chat, Gustav. How do you keep it investor friendly, but still convince them that you're passionate about your startup and get them excited about its possible impact? Okay, easy answer, Gustav. You ready? This is the cheat sheet. And actually, I recorded 10 videos on this 2 days ago, but they're not public yet, so I unfortunately can't send them to you. So make an executive summary in your pitch, okay? This is what I want you to do. Put all your boring crap in the appendix, okay? All your hardcore customer data, like your Excel spreadsheets, your financial business plan, maybe like details on how you're gonna hit your milestones, your target, your org chart, all that stuff, put it in the back in the appendix, okay? That's not fluff, by the way, but it is detail that your investors don't need to know in the body of your pitch. And then, in let's say 10 to 15 pages max, I want you to outline some key things: your executive summary, the missions and values of your company. I think that's actually important. I don't think that's fluff. Some investors might, some won't. I think it's important. The value proposition to your customers, right? The highlights of the milestones you want to hit. Obviously, a description of your product or service, the highlights of your financial projections. And if you have a phased out strategy for rolling out your product, put that in the body of your presentation as well. Some people call it the executive summary. Some people just call it, your pitch. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but in those first 10 to 12 or max 15 pages, you want to have that be really punchy. And here's another sort of, I would say, a little bit advanced. I don't think it's advanced, but some people might. When you're doing the titles of your pitch deck, okay, or you're listening up, the titles of your pitch deck should tell the whole damn story. So don't put like financial projections as a title. You're just wasting space. It should say something like, seed capital funds us 2 milestones and through 12 months. So if I just read all 10 or 12 titles of of each page, right, of your presentation, I know your whole pitch. I know your whole pitch just by reading those 10 or 12 titles. It just reads like a story. And then the graphs or the bullets or whatever, or the pictures of your beautiful faces on each slide are just backup to prove your title. Does that make sense? I'm going to take that as a yes. Your silence as yes. Peter says, do you often invest with other investors? The answer is yes. You know why? Investors are also lazy, and we get pitched thousands of times. So if one of my friends who I trust, who has sold a lot of companies, invested a lot of companies, then I know they've done their work. I'll give you an example. I put a decent amount of money into a company called One Medical about 2 years ago, and I did a little bit of work thematically, but not that much. But my friend, who's one of the co-founders of Groupon, has put a ton of money in that business. And in 2 years, we've made 4 or 5 times our money, just went public, right? It doesn't always work like that. Obviously, I'm telling you a success story, not a failure story. But sometimes when you're good friends with someone, you trust them, but it's not really about trust, like, oh, I trust you, you're a great person. No, trust is a function of a person's track record. That goes for investors and that goes for entrepreneurs. So one of the key things that I said, actually the second point on my, 7-point notes here was that the founding team has to have the requisite combined skills. If I had, not 15 minutes, but I had 20 minutes to tell you more, I would have said the founding team has to have the team and the track record to justify their fundraise. What does that mean on the track record? It means that they've done this before, they've raised money before, they've sold companies before, they've worked at companies where it makes sense that had they had this certain experience and this certain track record, that they could actually create this successful startup. Another thing when it comes to team and track record, folks, is that it is extremely attractive to investors that the team has worked together before. Not all investors are going to notice this, but they should, because you know how hard it is to work with somebody. right? You need that chemistry. You need that complementary skill set. You need that shared company culture, those shared values, right? If you haven't worked together with your co-founder before, that can be not a red flag, but a yellow or orange flag for investors, because startups are so hard. You're going to spend 80, 90 hours a week with this person or these people. If you haven't worked together before, you may not even like them. I mean, that's going to be hard, right? So that's another critical thing when you're evaluating founding teams, to show you've worked together before. Now, if you haven't worked together before, how can you cheat that? How can you hack that? Well, you can spend a lot of time testing your value proposition, essentially beta testing and getting data with customers. And what happens during that time? Weeks go by, months go by, right? You learn if you can work together. And then when you go pitch investors, number one, you have an appropriate customer value proposition, right? Which is, probably the most important thing, that your customers like your product. And number two, that you can say, hey, no, we haven't worked together before, but we've known each other for a long time. And we've been working together great for these last 8 months, developing this great pitch deck and this great customer value prop. And that will, hopefully bridge that gap. Matt says, thank you for sharing Navin, Thukkaram, and getting straight to the point. Matt, please go ahead and follow me for more stuff if you want at Dream Navin. I hope you guys do. And I do a lot of this, just punchy stuff on there. If anyone has any questions, I'm here to answer. I'm awake. Guys, I had to wake up at 6:30 a.m. to hang out with you, okay? So you can better believe I'm going to stay on an extra 5 minutes if you have questions. I normally get up at 8:30. I'm a late riser. So 6:30 was so damn early for me. So I'm happy to stay on for another few minutes to answer some questions. Let's see what else you guys got. I want some interesting questions, people. Someone says, all money is green, but sometimes green represents new growth and sometimes represents sickness. Okay, well, I'm going to take that. And I got a question on cap table advice. I will answer that too. I actually just did a video on this too a couple days ago, which I'll probably post in the next few days, which is that growth versus scaling. And yes, growth has the same, starts with green, growth, same letter, but growing and scaling are two different things, right? You can grow and have a lot of sickness, like someone said in the chat, because you can have growing pains. And why do you have growing pains, folks? You have growing pains because you do not have the systems to scale. I'll give you an example for my own portfolio. Like I said, I'm lead investor of a company called Skykick. We hired 100 people, which is a lot of people, about 2 years ago. We almost doubled our team from 100 something to 200 something. We had to have the right hiring systems, onboarding systems, training systems, and company culture, which is kind of a system too, to ingest those people and make them productive on day one. If we didn't have the systems, can you imagine what a disaster doubling your staff, doubling your team? And a lot of these people are, these are all very, very high level talented people. Okay. We weren't just hiring, 1,000 retail people to work in a bunch of stores. These are engineers, support, all sorts of people that are key to the business. So you had to have those hiring and sales and onboarding systems to bring them on and get them productive from day one. If you don't have systems, you will have growing pains. So the way I talk about it is there's growth and there's growing and there's scaling. And when you scale, you put people and strategies and money into a system, and that system creates that return on investment, and that system creates happy employees and team members, okay? Not just one system, probably several systems. So that's the difference to me between growing and scaling, making sure you've tested those systems in your company to make sure that you can scale. It's no different than having a software product. If you have a software product that is really buggy, is it going to scale? No, of course not going to scale. So when you go out and you have 1 million more users, guess what? Your platform's going to crash. You can't have that happen. So when you go on scale, make sure you're not growing, make sure you're scaling and you're ready for that growth. Let's go. Should I think different? And I'm not answering these in order because all these questions are coming up. So you think different for our first or second or third round of investors? Are they different? And Mikhail, they definitely are. So let me, I could answer that all day. We could spend half an hour on that one question. It's a very good one. But here's the drill, okay? So for your, let's think, I can think about 5 different answers to this question. It's a very good question. So for your first and second and third round of investors, yes, they're going to be different. How are they going to be different? They're going to be looking for different things from your business. Are you going to be the same business on day 1 versus day 366? I sure hope not, right? So your early stage investors are going to be a little more lax in what they're looking for. They're primarily going to be looking really all stages people are investing in your company, right? But really the first and second stage, sort of the bootstrapping stage, the friends and family round, the first official seed round, whether you want to call that 1 round or 3 rounds, it doesn't really matter. But that early stage time, when you're a baby company, they're really looking more to you, Mikhail, for can you do the job? Does the founding team have what it takes to get it done? Do they have the track record? Do they have the experience? Whatever it is, whatever they're looking for, mainly that. For your second and third round, guess what? They're going to say, okay, you've raised, $100,000. You've raised $1 million. You've raised whatever you've raised. What did you do with the money, Mikhail? Did you just burn it on parties and keg stands? I hope not. Or did you take that money, turn your beta product into a real product? Did you generate, number 1, which I teach on Innovation Bootcamp, number 1, did you generate usable customer data? I'm not saying sales for sure. It doesn't need to be sales. It doesn't have to be money. But did you generate usable customer data to make decisions going forward? Did you prove to that second or third round of investors that you use the previous investment dollars well and you learn something, not learn from failure, but learn something about your customer? And now when you take that second or third round, you turn that into a money machine or a data generating machine to allow you to hit your next set of milestones. Said another way, did you hit the milestones you said you would when you raised your previous round of financing? So definitely second and third round investors are going to think about stuff like that. In terms of, are they different folks? Absolutely. Because when you first raise money, you're raising, let's say, 1 million SEK or 5 million SEK, whatever it happens to be, right? But your second and third round, you're going to be raising more money. Your friends and family are not going to be able to write you probably, $1 million check or a $2 million check. So when you're scaling your business, you will clearly have to go to different types of investors. Maybe it's from high net worth individuals when you're early stage investors to big family offices, maybe from family offices to institutional investors like venture capital firms. And much later it would be, growth equity firms, private equity. But that's, this is an early stage keynote. So that's going to be down the future. But yes, over time, the types of investors change because you're going to be raising more and more money. And as you get to be a more and more mature, even a more and more mature early stage startup, investors are going to be looking for a lot more from you, a lot more data, a lot more maturity in your team, in your product, really on all lines, all parts of your business, right? They're going to be looking for a much more developed company later and later funding rounds. All right, good question. According to you, thank you, Subhash. I appreciate the stamp of approval. According to me, what is the best way to handle validation of the company? Okay, so big question. And I don't want to keep going back to this, but it's an easy cheat. Go back to my Instagram @DreamNavin, and I talk about this literally all the time on innovationbootcamp.com on how to handle validation for your company. But basically, Subhash, you want to test and learn. Test and learn. I call it test, learn, evolve. Test, learn, evolve. You want to keep iterating and keep testing with your customers in order to validate your value proposition of your product and service. And Subhash, here is, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, here is one thing that even the best founders like you, a mistake that many make, which is that they confuse having a product or service for a value proposition. Let me give you an example that I use all the time. I love this example. How many of you guys like donuts? If you like donuts, type yes and type a question in the chat. Do you like donuts? I know donuts is one of those things that translates really well in English and post-svenska because everybody likes donuts. But what is the value proposition of a donut? Is it that it's round, has a hole in it, has, flour and sugar and whatever, butter to make the donut? No. Those are simply the characteristics of the donut, right? Those are the qualities of the donut, perhaps, however you want to talk about it. But that's not the value proposition of the donut. What is the value proposition of the donut? Well, I would have said it tastes good. It leaves you with that satisfied feeling in your mouth. At one of my recent boot camps, one of the folks said, the value proposition of the donut, are you listening carefully? The value prop of the donut is that sugary goodness, which I think was the best ever description of the value proposition of the donut. So a lot of founders think that my product or service is my value proposition. But guess what, guys? That is from our perspective. You got to look at it from the customer's perspective, right? When a customer is looking at your product or service, what do they think the value proposition is? They don't care if it's made with, high fructose corn syrup or cane sugar or date sugar or nuts or whatever. They don't care if how the donut's made. They care about what is the value proposition to them, to that customer. Why am I paying $4 for your donut? What is the value prop it's giving me? So you can sit there and yell at them in the face, say, hey, my donut's bigger, my donut's more round, or my donut's oval. They don't care. They just care about what the value proposition is to them. That's why, Subhash, you always have to test with your customer and get their feedback. And I don't mean surveys, by the way, okay? Because customers will tell you they love your product, but how do you really know? You only know when they buy it, right? When they give you hard-earned kroner or dollars for that product, then you know they really care about, or they really value that value proposition. They really resonate with the value proposition that you're giving them. So you got to keep testing with customers. And you can do that so many different ways. We could talk about that forever, but that is the key to validating your value proposition. Let's go. We got a lot of questions here. Ooh, I'm going to take a hard question. Any advice for rebuilding a startup team? That is a tough one. I'm not going to even say your name in case your co-founder's on here, but I need to replace an old co-founder with a new teammate after pivoting. Okay. Whew, that's a tough one, but a very, very important one. You know why? Because this happens all the time. So don't feel bad about your question because this is a very common thing. It's happened in so many of my companies. Number one, do it as soon as possible. Not just because time is money, because you have other employees, and your other employees, they know when the founders are fighting, okay? They know. I'm going to move here to get out of the light, okay? They know when the founders are fighting. They know when the company is not aligned. So you have to replace that founding team member ASAP, okay? Number two, if that founding team member is vesting into shares, they are literally taking money, equity out of your pocket and out of the pocket of your lovely investors every single month that they are still part of the team. So, and by the way, you're not doing them any favors by keeping them along for 6 more months. You are hurting them because they can't go with dignity to their next opportunity, right? Because when they leave, what has to happen for them? Have you thought about this one? When they leave, they want to be part of co-founding a successful startup. That's your startup. That's your startup, right? So when they leave, it's very important for them that your startup is successful. How do you make it successful? Unfortunately, to make your startup successful, you have to remove them from the company. So you're doing them a favor and you a favor by doing it very, very quickly. The other thing I would say, if it's a sensitive emotional situation when rebuilding your team, you got to think about these conversations as a multi-stage game, right? You're not having one conversation saying, Billy Bob, sorry, you need to go. right? That's not how it's going to be. You have to sort of slow walk the person to that eventual removal from the company. You have to do it as quickly as possible, but you have to be sensitive because you don't want any tension when you're removing them from the company. The other thing is, if you have early stage investors already, it's very important to get them involved on board and not gang up on the person, but make it seem like, look, this is a concerted effort. We're going this way. Your skills are over here. You were amazing for that strategy, but for this strategy, we need your 30% of the company to give to a new co-founder or a new CEO or 10 new engineers to make it successful. You still own X% of the company, so it's in your interest to want to make it successful. And let's make this a clean split so it looks good for you, it looks good for us, and the company be successful so everybody makes money in the end. So hopefully that helps you when replacing a co-founder. All right, a lot of people are still in here. I'm okay. Great job, guys. I'm looking for more questions, but I have a lot of donut analogies in here. What if B2B? Oh, this is a good question. This is a good. I haven't even read the question, EO. I've not even read your question. I know it's a good question because this is a favorite topic of mine because I've done both B2B and B2C. What if B2B is the lowest hanging fruit and is likely to help B2C growth, which has greatest potential? Is it possible to exploit opportunities in several segments while still staying focused? No, it is not. I love this one. I'm not laughing because this is great thinking, by the way. This is great thinking because you're thinking about it exactly the right way. B2C has the greatest potential because bam, you nail one customer, you have 1 million users, right? Bam, you nail one customer, you have no more customer acquisition cost. They're distributing and selling for you. Bam, you nail one customer, you have access to a 1,000-person sales force, which is selling your product. But you and I both know, it does not work that way, right? Because what happens in B2C? In B2C, you have to sell that product into the B2C. That takes time. That takes really expensive and experienced salespeople. Most founders are not, enterprise salespeople that have sold stuff for 20 years and know, 100 people and do drinks with those people on a weekly basis for the last 20 years. Most founders aren't those people. So you got to hire those people. Those people are really expensive. That means you got to raise a lot of money. And by the way, you got to give them at least 1 or 2 years of runway because they're probably in their 40s. They probably don't want to be part of a failed startup, right? So you have to fund the company for a whole B2C business model. And then you got to go actually be successful selling your product or service into these big enterprise companies. What does that mean? Well, what that means is that your funding cycle of 12 to 18 months does not match the sales cycle of 6 months to maybe up to 3 years at the enterprises. Probably not 3 years because you're probably not going to, want to work with those companies, but you'd be surprised how long they can stretch it out. And by the way, what if your contact gets fired? What if your contact or contacts, because in big enterprise sales, do you sell to one person? No, you literally got to sell to like a dozen people and their team. And you got to be aligned with their priorities perfectly. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. And then you got to sign that contract. Just the contract, after the product and operations teams have said, boom, stamp approval, check, check, check. We love these people. To work with the legal team to sign these contracts can take another 3 months to 12 months, literally 12 months. It could take 12 months. Hopefully not, but it takes at least 90 days, right? And then after 90 days, they probably are funding something for you. That takes 2-3 weeks. The whole time you're working for free, by the way, EO, you're working for free. And then what happens? You got to train their sales team. Now, hopefully during the contract negotiations, you've trained their sales teams, and then the sales teams have to actually sell it. By the way, this 6 to 12 months has gone by during everything I've been talking about. You hope your market hasn't changed. But by the way, your market has definitely changed. The priorities inside that company has definitely changed. If it's a public company, they've had 4 quarters of earnings. That's changed. Maybe COVID's changed. You see what I'm saying? B2B can be very, very difficult to stay focused. So my personal opinion is that if B2B is the lowest hanging fruit, go out, nail that B2B, prove that there's a customer value proposition for that customer, and then go to multiple B2Bs and say, hey, enterprise company, we're killing it. We're killing it over here. And you have to use our product. And then whoever's the fastest to work with, go work with them. But I have to say, if your B2C strategy is working, I would stick to that until you've raised enough money to actually go to do B2B properly. Because you really shouldn't be doing B2B that much as a founding team. It takes way too much funding. And if you're able to get that because of previous success, that's great. But B2B can be very, very, very difficult. I'm not saying, of course, there's a million B2B SaaS software companies, and I invest in cloud SaaS software. So I get it, right? I have a B2B company that has 20,000 B2B customers around the world. So it can be very lucrative. But when you're starting out, it can be very, very challenging. So I want you to make sure you're focused on those challenges. Nabil, good question. First time, I'll read your question again. In the post-pandemic world, what do you think about co-founders located in different geographies? That's a tough one. It was never recommended, but before, do you think it's be more acceptable in the future? The short answer is yes. Everything has changed in the post-pandemic world. I would have said for sure no. Number one, I would also have said for sure no multiple offices. Forget about co-founders. Do not have multiple offices with different people working different places. But now you sort of have to. Everyone's working from home every way. I will say this, though. When you have offices, especially in the Nordic region where you can office in Finland or in Stockholm and Oslo, in Copenhagen, right? There are different cultures and there is benefit to meeting once in a while, even if it is with a mask. So I would say in general, I do not recommend having multiple offices when you're a 5-person company or you're working from, different cities, different countries. Being together is very important. And I think that when you're looking at an investment, it matters if the co-founders have worked together in the past. Now, if you've worked together in the past very well, and now you're working remotely, that's not an issue. It's really more about the cohesiveness of the company. And that's going to be a function of multiple offices and having worked together. Does that make sense? So it's not really the fact that you have co-founders in different cities that matters. It's about what does that tell me about the stickiness of the company? What does that tell me about how they work together? What does that tell me about how they'll work together in the future? That's what it's really telling me as an investor. Eo, thank you for saying it's very insightful. Follow up on the last question, Mikhail, double dipping on the donut. How big pieces? How big? Okay, well, this is a very customized question, Mikhail. Mikhail, I just recorded literally 20 videos on fundraising fundamentals. I did not even record a video on this because it's a pretty advanced question, pretty customized. So if I give you like a rule of thumb, it's not going to maybe make sense for your company because rules of thumb is a one-size-fit-all answer, and they don't always, they may not always make sense. So I don't want to guide you in the wrong direction. But with that said, what are the rules of thumb? Mikhail, and I'm putting, a lot of you guys are asking similar questions. I'm putting in Dream Navin bio. So go to Instagram, follow me at Dream Navin, and you can literally ask me these questions in my comments to my posts 24/7. All right, on Instagram, and I will pretty much answer all of them, especially if you ask them twice and say you saw me at Upstart, I will answer the question. So following up on the last question, how big pieces of the company should you offer on the first, second, or third round? Okay, well, Mikhail, the short answer is as little as possible. However, what if you have a bunch of investors that don't care about your business, right? Let's say I'm raising a seed round of $500,000. If I have $10,000, $50,000 investors, none of them may care about my business because it's not enough money for them to care, right? If I have one investor that's a very competent, connected, interested, and smart investor, and they take half of your C round, they're really going to care about making sure that they don't lose all their money, right? They're going to want to know that you're going to be successful. So that one investor may be more helpful than 20 other investors, right? And that's important. So having someone that actually has skin in the game in your business could be important. At the same time, if you have one investor that takes your whole seed round and then, God forbid they get sick or COVID happens and they go to they go out to the archipelago for 6 months, then you're kind of screwed, right? Because no one's really helping you from the investment side if you need that help. If you don't need that help, that's great. But if you do need help, then it's going to be a tough slog with them. So it really depends on the quality of the investor. It depends how much they have of your company. Do they care? It depends how much money it is for them. Is it a meaningful amount of money for them to actually care that they're part of your business? So all these things factor in when you're talking about how big of a company you want. Uh-oh, guys, I think I just missed my next call. So that's not good. Let me check. This is real time here. Yes, I have a phone call right now. I gotta go. I have a podcast coming out. I'm trying to get Eric Schmidt, the founder of Google, on my podcast. So this is a call for that. Love you guys. @Dream Navin. Follow me. I'll see you all later. Talk to you soon. Bye.